Hi everyone, I'm Jarrod Brown, one of the editors of Build It, and on today's industry spotlight, we are talking about one of the unsung heroes of the tradie toolkit, the workboot. So joining me here today is Uvex's Director of Product, Caleb Wegener. Caleb, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Joe.
So today I'll just be picking Caleb's brain about what exactly tradies should look for in the perfect piece of footwear, while we take a closer look under the hood of Uvex's latest launch of women's work boots. So Caleb, first things first, can you tell us a bit about the new line? What kind of research and development went into creating Uvex's ultimate women's work boot?
Uvex has been around for almost 100 years, so 1926. That's why I've got a 26 sitting here on my shirt. We've been doing boots in Europe for over 60 years now, but never done them in Australia. The reason for that is we've always looked at sort of what out of Europe would work in Australia, and the general scenario is not very much. So this range has been built from the foot down, specifically for workers in Australia.
I
So
like
we
that.
spent a
Foot
full
down is
nine
good.
months. I like that one. Always embrace the pun jokes with footwear and the foot. So we spent the first 9 months really looking at the issues that weren't being well met with workers in Australia. Really spending a lot of time with people on site, looking at the scientific research. I have a background as a podiatrist, also a PhD in footwear biomechanics. So also coming from the scientific approach to designing footwear to better match workers in Australia. And the big issues that were facing workers in Australia was really around the fatigue. So the weight of the footwear, lack of flexibility of the footwear, and the general lack of mobility when walking in the footwear really affected workers' general fatigue at work. Along with the fit of the footwear, so generally the footwear, a lot of 63% actually of workers in Australia are wearing footwear that's 1 to 2 sizes too big in order to get the fit of the footwear, and also the lack of breathability. So it's amazing some of the stories that people would tell you about having to hose out their boots on a Friday afternoon, put them out on the veranda to dry by the weekend, by Monday, so that they didn't stink out the rest of the neighbourhood. So we spent a lot of time and effort really designing the footwear to flex and move with the way that people walk, specifically around the geometry of the footwear, the flexibility in the upper of the footwear. So the upper is really designed to flex and move as people squat and work through the day. It's also really being nice and flexible through the ball of foot so people can get a nice smooth ride. We also spent a lot of time trying to optimize the breathability in the key sweat zones of the foot and really help to try and reduce that internal buildup of moisture and also the heat stress that contributes to workers. With that, we were able to actually reduce workers' perceived fatigue in the workplace by 20% and also improve the breathability of the footwear by 15%. And compared to workers' existing footwear, they actually rated it as being 38% more breathable than their current footwear. So it was really nice to see that research and time and effort and putting all the time into really focusing on those details that sort of add up to build that bigger picture in the
Yeah,
completion of the
absolutely.
product actually come to be appreciated by the workers on site and in the workplace.
So, with so many different sectors and site activities to factor in, is there a single perfect all-rounder tradie work boot that you would recommend? Or is it just another case of bringing the right tool for the right job?
You were right on that one, spot on the right tool for the job. One of the things that, and the first thing with that is footwear is technically personal protective equipment. And the first thing there is everyone's foot's different. Fit's absolutely critical. So we can talk about the, really high energy return foam that we put into our footwear or other technologies. But if the footwear doesn't actually fit you, then there's actually no point in getting it right. So we actually do two widths in the footwear. So we do standard widths and also extra wide fittings. As well as now in the women's range, we do a narrow fit and a wide fit because just with like everyone else, there's no one's shape of a woman's foot. So really optimizing and giving the women flexibility to actually focus on selecting the right footwear for their foot. And then being able to do that. And then when it comes to the actual task at work, footwear really needs to be selected around the hazards that workers are exposed to and the terrain that they're working on. Everything from we actually analyse the amount of time that people in the construction industry and other trades spend on smooth surface versus rough surfaces. And you can think about that a bit like a car tyre. So there's certain tyres that are designed for off-road, certain tyres that are designed for on-road, and you're going to get different performance benefits in those different environments. And there's a whole lot of other additional safety features that safety footwear can also provide that can provide workers specific protection against, for instance, this footwear is electrically insulating, so for potential accidental contact with electricity, which is quite common in the construction trades, that can provide a second line of defence if everything else goes a bit pear-shaped, which unfortunately happens all too often. So it really is about selecting the right footwear for the individual, selecting it for the hazards that are available in that specific task. And it's not just necessarily the industry, but the specific tasks that workers are working in that subsector of the industry. And then also selecting the right footwear for the right terrain and the surfaces that they're working on.
So you talked a bit about breathability, insulation, width. What would you say are the essential elements or features every tradie should look for when they're buying a work boot?
Yes, absolutely. The fit's number one. So that's why we spent such a lot of time really focusing on getting the right fit for the footwear and then offering a really large spectrum of fits. So what we do with our multiple fit system is we actually have multiple widths in the same length. So that way you can fit footwear for the length and then you can also fit it for the width. One of the other nice things we do to really allow that customization of fit as well is to also provide or sell additional footbeds, which can then provide for that are designed for either a low, neutral or high arch foot, which then allows further customization of the foot and further support for the worker. So what that means is that you can then really get the right fit for the individual, you get the right support, you reduce the irritation on the foot, reduce your chances of blistering and other fatigue related issues. So that's really the number one. The next thing you want to look for is selecting the footwear for the hazards that you're involved in, so that you're getting the right level of protection. Once you have that, then you're really wanting to look for footwear that's really optimized in its cushioning system, so really help reduce that fatigue and maximize that energy return, and also the breathability of the footwear as well. So it really does come down to very much similar to before. The fit's the important part, then getting the footwear around the right hazards in the different areas. For instance, this footwear resists 300 degrees heat resistance on the sole. A lot of footwear in the market only resists 130. So if you're cutting metal and you've got those offcuts and things sticking around, that'll melt and that will stick into the bottom of the sole, which can then obviously cause a lot of deterioration of the footwear and in other areas provide a significant hazard in that environment. It really is important to select the footwear that fits the individual, then select it around those hazards, and then provide that level of support and customization that you might need in those environments.
Perfect. And look, just coming back to the new line of women's workwear, after interviewing several female tradies over the last couple of years, we've heard a lot of complaints about general construction workwear just not fitting quite right for the women on the tools. You mentioned width before, but are there any other key differences between the men's and women's work boots to make it more comfortable for the country's lady tradies?
Yeah, so we spent a lot of time really focusing in women in particularly construction, mining, and other industries that wear safety footwear. And one of the things they were really quite clear on is they didn't want to pink it and shrink it, is the saying that's done around the place. So what we did spend a lot of time on is really working with them on what they really wanted out of the footwear. And then in our women's range, we do our standard line in our women's fit, which is on our narrower last. It's slightly subtle differences. But as I mentioned earlier, there's not one homogeneous woman's foot shape. So that's why we do multiple fits and then multiple insoles availability that will still maintain the certification of the footwear to then allow the women to actually customize the fit and actually get the right fit for them. Because it's, while some women have narrower feet, there's also women that have wider feet. And it's interesting, similarly out on site, people in the women, some would want narrower, some want wider. And of course, that's just natural variability that you get in the humans. So we expect that and we cater for that, providing that really customization ability essentially with both the insoles and the width options to provide that level of fit and support for the worker. What we also do is we then combine it with all our other technologies such as bionomics, which is the biomechanical design integration into the upper and the sole of the footwear. So it really does design to move as one with the worker. And then we have really high energy return foams. So a lot of foams in safety footwear are quite a dead foam, so they're a lot like walking on the beach. They tend to absorb energy very well, but they don't tend to give very much back. And that's one of the reasons we get really fatigued when walking on the beach, is because the surface gives you nothing back. So you lose a lot of mechanical energy to walk. So we actually maximize the energy return in our footwear. So we actually get over 60% energy return in the foam of our footwear, which is that whole foam in the midsole. What that means is it actually reduces the amount of oxygen that people use when they're walking and at work, and then reduces their fatigue as well. So we've packed the footwear with a lot of features, both in the compounding and design of the footwear, and then combined it with a lot of customizability both in the fit and support of the footwear. We then also spent a lot of time asking them simply what they aesthetically wanted them like, and the hero out of the range in that process, which was all from right across the country, from the East Coast to the West Coast and from all the way from Melbourne to Cairns. And the winner of that sort of process and the discussions with them, and it was quite an interesting conversations, was actually the cement tan colourway in the design package that we ended up coming through with. I went through quite a few iterations, but essentially what we wanted to do was to actually match it to the colour that a lot of the dust is on site. So if you're working on a construction site, there's a lot of recycled aggregate, crushed concrete that gets used. Once that slab gets down, it often releases a lot of that concrete dust. So a lot of boots, and particularly back boots, get quite dirty in a whiter colour. So we actually match the colour to the colour of cement. So when they get dirty, they actually look the same colour as they were when they're new, and actually dirty nicely, which was one of the great feedback we got during the development process of the footwear. So it actually looks just as nice after it's got a bit of concrete dust over it or cement dust over it as it does when it's new.
Sounds perfect for the job site. So with more female workers set to enter the industry in the coming months and years, do you see this women's work line expanding in the future? Are there any sort of products coming down the line that we can expect to see?
Yeah, so we do currently we do 2 colorways in the women's footwear. We do 2 in the men's as well, different color versions. But so cement tan and a black version. So there's always a trusty different industries where people prefer to wear black, and sometimes from a uniform perspective. We also already have a new female style in the design phases at the moment. Actually, further than it's actually just finalised in the design phases and ready to go into production. So we'll see that coming through in the near future as well. So we're definitely expanding our women's range, and I'm sure as the percentage of women continues to grow, we want to cater equally for that male and female worker in the workplace.
Beautiful. Well, it sounds like uvex is bringing some much needed options for the women on the tools. I'm sure our readers would look forward to seeing more to come in the future. So a big thank you again to Caleb for joining me here today. If any of our Lady Tradie listeners want to snag a pair of uvex work boots for yourself, you can check out their new range at www.uvex-safety.com.au.